Warren Wolf, how you doing?
Everything is cool, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. You were just before we started rolling. You mentioned a certain convention that's occurring this week.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in some strange times.
Yeah, that was the exact words I was about to say. Some interesting days, coming up. So.
Yeah, and it's like the world is kind of self-destructing. It's like imploding or something.
Yeah.
All around us is all this. It's just all this stuff that you couldn't even. I mean, you couldn't even make this stuff up. You couldn't. I mean, in your wildest dreams. I mean, the pandemic, and then the race, the protest, Black Lives Matter stuff, George Floyd, and
a brother,
and all this.
Brother today that just got shot too.
Yeah. Guy,
Wisconsin. I forget his name. Gerard, something like that.
Yeah, shot 7 times in the back.
Yeah.
And it looks like it was some kind of like he was trying to break up some kind of squabble between two women, and then he just walking around casually to his car, and it's like you look at the video, it's like he didn't realize that he didn't realize the police were behind him.
Yeah.
Or like they were following him, or that they were saying anything to him. I mean, that's the way it looks. I mean, it's just it's messed up, man.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, now that we're
way to start the interview.
That's right. Now that we're all caught up. Okay, so that's the worst stuff we're going to say. Now we're going to get into the good stuff. All right. So, we met in Columbus. You were a guest artist with the Columbus Jazz Orchestra, and I was playing in the band. I'm trying to think of when that was. When was that, like 3 or 4 years ago?
3 years ago. It was with Byron Strickland and who was it, Harry Allen?
Yeah, that's right. Harry Allen, that's right. And it was a pretty cool thing. I got to play with you a little bit. We were featured together on something, like doing some trading. I think I was playing flute.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun. And as part of that concert, we did the thing where you played all the rhythm section instruments. You walked around and.
Right. That's right. I played some organ too.
Yeah.
If I recall, the only thing I did not play was the bass for some. I can't remember that part, but I do remember I played some organ.
No, you played. I mean, if memory serves, you played the bass too.
Oh, okay. I probably just watched a couple courses. I was like, no solos.
Yeah. I think it was like a blues or something.
Yeah.
And so very, very impressive. Did you grow up in church?
No, I didn't. My parents, I have 2 older sisters. And it's a long, complicated story. It stems back to some things that happened with my parents back in the day as to why they didn't raise us in church. So the main lesson that they taught me and my 2 older sisters was to just respect everybody and love everybody. They kind of said you don't need to go to church for that, to learn that, and that's pretty much how it is, how it's always been.
I only said that because it's in black church there's it's pretty common to have guys that play a lot of instruments. One of the guys that I interviewed for this series, a good friend of mine, Hamilton Harden. He's a terrific plays everything, plays saxophone. He's a great singer, and he grew up in church, and that was the thing. And it was kind of like whenever there was an opportunity to, a vacancy or a need, it's like, okay, well, let me go and do that. So it's kind of like almost a utilitarian kind of thing where you just kind of get in where you fit in, kind of a scenario.
Yeah,
So
no, my dad was the one that got me started on all the multi instruments because he played everything.
okay, yeah,
He played drums and keys and vibes, and his main thing is hand percussion. So I was just trying to copy everything that he did.
right, right. Now, so talk to us about how you came up in early influences and maybe some early mentor figures. I mean, you just mentioned that your father was one of those.
Yeah. So I'm born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, and I'm currently still living in Baltimore. I started playing at the age of 3 years old. I grew up in a pretty rough part of Baltimore. You know, I've seen a lot of stuff. You know, I grew up right in the middle of the hood. But in order for my dad to kind of like give me a trade, you know, something to do, and so I wouldn't go that route. I mean, don't get me wrong. I still went outside and played with friends, but he was like, "I'm gonna give you something to do."
Right.
And that probably comes from his military background because he was in Vietnam. So he got me started playing music, and you know, he wasn't a musician as a professional musician, like touring the world. He was a history teacher in high school and middle school, but he had a band on the side, you know, just to make some extra money out back in the day, and they played a lot around Baltimore, DC. So they used to rehearse in our basement a lot. So I used to always go, you know, just sit on the steps, and they used to be playing just everything. It wasn't necessarily in the jazz style, but so this is probably like 1982 I'm talking about. I was born in '79, so they were playing stuff like Anita Baker, Yellow Jackets, Spyro Gyra. If they did go into any type of jazz, it would have been somebody like Stanley Torrentine, you know, somewhere around that nice soul jazz, like the Cannonball era when he was playing like Mercy Mercy Me with Joe Zawinul, all of that good stuff. They were playing stuff like that. And, you know, he started giving me lessons at the age of 3 years old. Next thing you know, 2 years later, at the age of 5, I had my first gig. I mean, it was just like a little thing I think at an old folks home, a senior citizens home, where I was just playing like Minuet and G, you know, some little things like that. But my father was like the biggest influence in my life. So he had me practicing from the age of 3 all the way up until 17, 90 minutes per day, every single day. And on the summertime, it doubled. So summertime, I would go practice from say 1 to 2:30, go outside, hang with friends, and then come back and practice again from 5:30 to 7:30. And that's 30 minutes on each instrument, 30 minutes on vibes / marimba, snare drum or drum set, and then piano, keyboard studies. Now within all of that time, I was playing, like he had me practicing all types of music. It was never just a jazz thing. Like, again, I didn't grow up in a jazz household. I just grew up in a music household. So we were practicing, he had me practicing like Bach, Shostakovich, Vivaldi. Flip the script, I'll be practicing James Brown, Stylistics, Beatles, to Elvis, to Anita Baker, you know, all of these different artists. And then sometimes even on my own, because like I said, I had 2 older sisters, they were growing up in that time. I mean, they're like, the oldest is 9 years old, the other one was 4 years older than me. But from what I remember, they were listening to a lot of New Edition, LL Cool J. So I'm hearing all of this stuff around the house, and I'm just trying to, you know, just soak it all in. So my father was the main influence in my life. For at least the first, I mean, he still is. That would never go away. Eventually, he enrolled me at the Peabody Preparatory, and I started studying with this guy. He's now deceased. He was a member of the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. His name is Leo LePage, and I was taking classical lessons with this guy for almost 7 years until I went to high school. And when I went to high school, I had to stop because it was kind of like they were saying, like, well, if you come to the high school, we have the other member of the Baltimore Symphony.
Thank you so much for watching my video so far. If you'd like to support, there are several ways to do so below. Also, likes are free. Please comment, share, and subscribe. Now back to the video.
Baltimore is definitely here. So there's no point in, it's like a conflict of interest. So I stopped with Leo after 7 years and went to the other guy at the high school, and his name is John Locke. So that's 3 influences right there. And I've only had 4. I can only name 4 like major influences. Again, my dad, Leo, John Locke, and then of course when I got to college, which is the late Dave Samuels. So those are my top 4. I have some heroes, I can say that, but those are like my main influences.
Now, so you started really young, and so I've heard some different, and in my own thoughts about this, this is interesting. Just different perspectives on how young is too young. There's an advantage to starting young because you get to that 10,000 hours that everybody's talking about. You get to that earlier. You get to that sooner. You still you're still going to need to live life so that you are able to, so you have a story to tell, so to speak. So you could gain a lot of facility and understand the music, but you might not understand necessarily the perspective of how to say certain things, so that they'll be a certain kind of impactful, which I think your life experience is required to start to gather some of that.
Yeah.
But a lot of kids, if you start them too young, they just get turned off by it. They just and it could even be kids that they have the aptitude.
Yeah.
Maybe they come from a musical family that, it's in their blood, but you try to start them, and if it's too early, then it's just not going to happen. But again, what is too early? And obviously for you, when you started, that was not too early. But for someone else, that might have been too early.
Yeah. Well, I kind of felt myself going down that path. I went to a performing arts high school. So the focus there was music, dance, art, and theater production, something like that. And I can honestly say, I'll just stick with my class, the class 1997. As far as musicians goes, I think I'm the only person. It was like a class of, at least in the music side, it was about maybe 25 or 30 of us who graduated. I think I'm the only one who's still doing it. I vividly remember coming up as a kid just absolutely hating music. And I was good at it. But I just, to have a child, like I look at my own children right now. Like I have 5 children, but I'm specifically thinking about my 4-year-old, my youngest one. And I was like, wow, I was 4 years old in the basement for 90 minutes practicing. Nowadays, I can't even get my 4-year-old to sit still on the stool to do a homework for like 15 minutes. And, it takes a certain amount of discipline to do that. I don't know what it was, but eventually as I was getting older, like especially when I got to my middle school years, I was just like, man, I was like, I'm not doing this. Somebody asked me recently, they said, what did you, they said, did you really enjoy music? And I was like, no, I didn't. What I wanted to do as a child was to either be a fireman, or my number one goal, honestly, was to work for NASA. It's something about the stars and space that even to this day, it just really intrigues me. I'm just like, this is beautiful. But my dad had other plans. So I think what happened somewhere around 7th grade, we had a school assembly for our jazz band. And our jazz band, we didn't play we had the whole setup, like trumpets, trombones, saxophones. We didn't have a bass player. We had a tuba player, and the charts back then, they actually had the bass lines written out. So the tuba player would quote unquote walk the bass lines. But we played tunes like "Pretty Woman" by Roy Orbison and Eye of the Tiger, you know, all that type of stuff. And I didn't know anything about like chord changes or anything. But what I've always noticed, eventually I developed it later. I had a good ear, so I would always try to play like the hottest thing off the radio. So I remember we were playing Louie, key is B flat of that tune, and I was playing keyboard in a jazz band. So when it came time for my solo, I started playing this tune called "Gypsy Woman" by Crystal Waters. It's like a nice little house beat thing. Man, when I played that song, because it was one of the hottest tunes on the radio at the time, like this is 1991, my whole class just went berserk. They was like, wow, yeah, what? Clapping and all types of stuff. So I started to think, if I can get this reaction from them, I wonder what I could do with this for real. From that moment on, I was like, let's get serious about it.
That's interesting. You know, I started young too.
Mm-hmm.
I started when I was 6.
Okay.
And my dad was my primary influence, still is. I mean, you know, and we don't talk anymore about technical things about music anymore. Yeah. Now we talk mostly about, you know, politics at my job or something, or, you know, how to navigate certain things. So he's still, you know, involved in shaping the way that I view things. And I'm always, you know, reaching out, you know, for that information I know he has and experience that he has. But he was my teacher until I went to college.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lesson with him 3 or 4 times a week. He was a great saxophone player, sounded like Lou Donaldson.
Yeah.
And he had real specific idea of what it is that I should be, you know, practicing, you know. So, you know, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, you know, reading stuff, playing by ear, playing classical stuff, playing jazz stuff. My mother was sort of the spiritual leader in the house. She took us to church, but I didn't play in church. Mm-hmm. I actually didn't play in church, really. I mean, I played a couple times. You know, there was maybe some special events or something, or for a service or something, every once in a while. But I didn't really start playing in church until I was maybe a junior in college. Mm. You know? So I didn't really grow up in church. I mean, my dad just insisted that, you know, if I was going to play saxophone, that I needed to be able to play all the saxophones and flute and clarinet, you know, because if you're going to play woodwinds, and that's, you know, that's what you have to. If you're going to play saxophone, then you need to be able to play flute and clarinet also. So something that I tell my students all the time now. And it's strange. I mean, it's what I wanted to do. Certainly there was lots of times with the sort of discipline that my dad was imposing that, you know, you get to a certain point and you naturally you're trying to measure you're trying to measure yourself by the resistance between you and your dad. Yeah. It's like a thing that kids do. My son does that. He's 7. Mm-hmm. You know, I see him doing that. And he's really just trying to measure the size of himself. How do I measure up to my dad? This is the prototype. And so even that stuff that kids do, like the wrestling and stuff, they want to wrestle with you and all like that, and they enjoy it and they love it. But part of it is they're trying to figure out, okay, where am I on the pecking order? Where do I, you know, where am I at? You know. Yeah. So, you know, all that stuff was happening, and I certainly, you know, there was certainly times where there was resistance and things. But one thing I wanted to ask you is about so you talked about styles of music that you practiced or that you played. Yep. But what was the approach? Like what did you do first? What did you do next? I mean, did your father have sort of a warm-up thing that he would have you do for each instrument with a certain rudiments, scales, and things that he had you practicing? What was a practice session like?
It kind of varied. I think in the beginning years, we concentrated a lot. Say, like if I was doing a lot of stuff on vibes and marimba, it would be a lot of scales and arpeggios and things like that.
Right.
Same thing if I was doing something on the drums. We used to work out in this book called Four-Way Coordination. If it wasn't that, we would do like just snare drum etudes. Like it was a book called the NARD, N-A-R-D, the NARD book. And then on piano, my dad always had me just learning chords, just in various ways. 1, 3, 5, 7. All right, let's drop the 1, put that in the left hand, then let's add the 9 to your right hand. And once we get to that 5 chord, you take that, this note and drop it down a half step, and then just all stuff like that. But then as I got older, I mean, not too much older, I'm talking about like, I'm going from like ages 6 probably to like 11. As I got to 11, 12, 13, it wasn't any warm-ups. It was more like, all right, you know what to do. You should be warm already. Let's just go. Let's go right at it. So I remember in high school, like my last years in middle school, high school, it's weird. I'm just thinking about it now. It's like as much planned as we did in high school, because like I said, it was a performing arts school. Even though we did 4 hours of playing there, I would come home and do another 90 minutes still. So by the time I got home from high school, we would, he wasn't so much enforcing it. He was there, when I'm in elementary and middle, he's enforcing it. He used to always sit on a bench with a stick and always just slap the time. He will always keep the time for me. Don't drop the beat. That was like one of his main messages. When I got to high school, he would just kind of just sit there and lay on the couch. We had a couch in our basement, and he would lay on the couch and he would say something like, yeah, today, wasn't like an assignment. He was like, why don't you just like a suggestion? Like, why don't you go throw on that Vivaldi concerto? Because I used to, a lot of stuff that I would play in the classical side, they didn't have any pieces made for vibes or marimba. So what a lot of people would do for me, they would say, let's put on this flute concerto, this flute sonata, or violin concerto, violin sonatas and things like that. Or the Bach cello suites. I would play all of that type of stuff. So he would say something like that, like, let's throw on Vivaldi's concerto in C major if we're going to work on this today. And if it wasn't coming from him, it was coming from my teacher in the high school. Like I said, he was a member of the symphony. He would easily give me assignments, and he was even more strict than my dad because my teachers then had more. His ears were just way more developed than my dad, of course, because he's in the symphony orchestra. So I had no choice but to practice, because if I messed up, first of all, my teacher's gonna fuss at me, and then I'm gonna get a failing grade. But my dad would always say, "Let's put this on. Let's try this. Let's try this. Let's try that. And let's try that." And eventually, once he saw that my teacher in high school had a nice handle on me, we started just trying other things. Like I was really early into like MIDI and all that stuff back then, like the early versions of it. I was really deep into that until basically until I graduated high school. I was like, all right, I'm done with that. So,
yeah, my dad had a studio, and so it started out. So I'm a little bit older than you. I was born in '74, October, in '74, and so he was a record producer, and he and a songwriter. He wrote kind of like Motown style songs. And actually recently he's been getting some royalty checks because some of the songs that he wrote years ago have been added to a few compilations of music from that era.
Nice.
And I was joking with him, and I told him, you finally made it. And he told me he followed that up by sending me a text message, which he was ultra resistant to any kind of text messaging for a long time. Yeah. And then he realized that he was going to have to cave because not only was I trying to text him sometimes, but then his grandkids were trying to, they wanted to, be able to do the same thing and get in touch with him. So anyhow, he sends me a text message saying, I got another check. Make sure that your copyright is right on all your music. That's like the moral of the story. Yeah, he was very he was strict with me, and the whole, even my affinity for working out, for weight training, that came from him. Yeah. It didn't come from us going to the gym together. It came from him having all of his kids, four of us, do exercises before we went to bed every night.
Wow.
Push-ups, set-ups, other calisthenics.
Yeah.
And now I'm the only one that kept doing it. but the idea was he was trying to establish an expectation of moving around. Yeah. And with the epidemic in our country, especially amongst black folks, of obesity. Mm-hmm. And then the term musician's physique does not particularly conjure up sculpted muscly figures, right? Yep. And so I think for him also, he wanted his children to have this sort of built-in something in our head that said, hey, you need to get up and move. Yeah. You need to go do something active. Mm-hmm. But that whole discipline thing, that's important. You can't accomplish anything. Not you can't accomplish anything unless you have that discipline thing working. Definitely. And I've seen a lot of really naturally gifted musicians totally fan out, because they couldn't keep the discipline thing together. They just couldn't do it. I've had students that were really talented that have come to come to school to study with me, and they couldn't last past a semester. Yeah. They just couldn't get themselves to stay on task. Mm-hmm. And so that's a great gift that your father gave you, and a great one that he gave me too. Yeah. My dad gave me too. So
awesome.
So let's talk about the fitness thing now. So I remember being on your Facebook, and this is a couple years ago, and you were throwing around those 100-pound dumbbells. Yeah. Pretty, like, it was like lightweight. So talk to us about your love affair with working out, because you have to have something going on with the gym in order to be able to lift those 100-pound dumbbells, which usually have a lot of dust on them because they don't usually get touched very much.
Yeah, no, I started lifting back in high school, but I didn't do it a lot. In high school I was pretty small. I was like at least weight wise, I was about 150 pounds. So I had the natural six-pack and all that good stuff. But again, it's just something that I just love doing. I think I started really taking it seriously when I got to Berkeley. I started taking it seriously because I wanted more sound on the instrument, on the bobs, because coming from a classical background, and this is all lead to fitness. My teacher told me, which is great. It's awesome advice. Keep your hands low, play with control. So when I transferred that same classical technique over to improv and jazz and stuff like that, I would be in a club, and it's like people couldn't really hear what I was doing. I was like, man, what? I was like, I need to project some more energy. And like I said, I was still kind of small. So one day I was in my dorm at Berkeley, and I was just looking in the mirror, and I was like, I was like, what can I do to get bigger? So I knew there was this little gym around the corner. I didn't have a lot of money. I talked to my mom. I said, Mom, can you loan me like $200? I was like, I want to try this gym out. I found something for like $40 a month. I could sign up for the whole year. She was like, all right, cool, no problem. So just training. Oh, the owner of the gym, he was kind of whack, but he took me through some whack workout. I mean, it was a good workout, but it just didn't make sense. He had me, I'll never forget it. He had me exercising my neck 1 second. And then he was like, all right, we're going to come do some biceps, and then we're going to do some calves, and then we'll do a couple pull-ups. So I didn't know any better, but I came back the next day and did the same thing. And then the next day I did the same thing. And my roommate, who's at the time, he's actually one of the biggest sound guys in the world. You know, I told him what I was doing. He was like, man, let me come with you. So long story short, from 1997 up until now, well, I would say maybe up until at least February, like right before the pandemic and everything.
Right.
I've always just been going really hard in the gym. Like you said, just slinging them 100s or 120s. Like the gym I go to now, the dumbbells go to like 150, but the previous gym was 120. Easily squatting 500-600 pounds, and I mean I was a little bit bigger then. But I kind of chilled out on that because I had a back injury. So, because something happened when I was squatting one day, I went down and I came up and I heard a pop. I was like, "What the hell is that?" But I stopped doing that, and nowadays, I mean, I'm aching to go back to the gym. I really want to, but because of my wife, she doesn't want me to go back. So I actually have some equipment here in the house that I'm working on, that I'm working with. But I spend a lot of time exercising the main muscle that we all need to do, which is your heart. So I do a lot of between running, jump rope, and running like in trails, like running trails in the woods and the forest.
Now wait a minute. Now wasn't it? It seems like I saw some footage on, maybe it was Facebook or Instagram or something, and it was you saying you was going to do a half marathon or something.
Yep.
Or you were.
Yeah, I've done 2 of those already. Now I haven't done them like in an actual race with other people.
Well, no, but you. I mean, it's the same difference. If you can, if you can, man, I can't run, man.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, I could run if somebody started chasing me. I got that same thing. I got, I'm black man in America, right? I got that same thing when somebody says, if somebody said, run, I would just start running. And then we figure it out later. I'm not gonna ask you, why am I running until we stopped and everybody's safe, So I can run like that.
Yeah.
But it tears up my knees and my shins. I get really bad shin splints, and then I'm a terrible heel striker. Yeah. Like walking around in the house, I remember especially the first few years my marriage, my wife, we've been married for 12 years?
Yeah.
And for the first few years of our marriage, she would constantly be complaining about how I walked around the house. To be like clunk, 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 and I come up the steps, clunk, clunk, clunk. It's because I'm a heel striker. And and I try to soften that up, and it kind of develops other problems. So I have sort of a bad habit with the way that I walk. Yeah. And which kind of translates into the way that I run. And then I just have, just like I said, it just tears my joints up, tears my knees up.
Well, that's why I don't do it all the time. I mean, like my wife, now she's a professional.
Well, you do it. You do it enough to be running 13 some miles. So we just talk about it this way. You don't.
That's what's fun. I mean, to be honest, like that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to mix it up. Like I'll probably, on average, 7 days a week, I'm going to run at least 4 of those. And then the other times, I mean, I'll walk through the hills. Sometimes I'll run the hills. But see, there's a lot of stopping and starting there. I don't want to run a decline so much, because if you trip over a tree branch, you will have some problems. Going uphill is one thing. That's something else. But when I was in the gym, instead of running on the treadmill, something I could easily do, I can hit 70 minutes on the Stairmaster. I mean, that's like nothing. I was like, cool. It's hard, but I would get through that by listening to like one of my favorite records. One record takes an hour.
Ah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm just like, all right, let me throw in the record, and I just zone out. I make sure I don't look at that clock, because that's the last thing I want to look at. So, but no, fitness is a big thing for me. I think a lot of people in music. I mean, I know a lot who are in fitness, but then there's a lot of us who don't. The musician, hang with other people. The musician lifestyle can be kind of hectic. We hanging out late, and cats eating late. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. Ain't nothing wrong with eating a slice of pizza, but at 2:00 in the morning, we all have done it. But what I'm saying, if you're gonna just continue to do that over and over,
right.
I try to encourage all my brothers and sisters in the music industry. I'm just like, listen, I was like, we got 24 hours a day. 45 minutes you can dedicate it to some type of fitness. I ain't saying you gotta be in the gym throwing up crazy pounds and stuff like that. I was like, just go for a walk. I was like,
right.
Just do something. You don't dedicate your whole life to just, I need to practice. I was like, that horn ain't going nowhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I was watching a clip of Joe Rogan on his podcast, and one of his guests said that they were describing someone that they knew, or whoever the subject was, and they said that they couldn't exercise, and he about split. He about he about blew his top, because he's so frustrated with people saying that they can't exercise. And now this person was a really big person, but he says everybody can exercise.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's just getting up and walking. And then after you can walk for a while, then try to jog. If you can't jog, then try to pick something up and lift that. Yeah. And if you can't do that, then he went through this thing where he was talking about everybody should do some kind of exercising. Everybody. Nobody is exempt. It doesn't matter how bad a shape you're in, how poor a shape, it doesn't matter what your medical condition is. Everybody should do some kind of physical activity every day.
Yep, I agree. Man, 2 days ago, not 2 days, what's today? Today is Monday. So Friday, myself, and two of my buddies live here in Baltimore, Sean Jones, trumpeter, and drummer Lee Pearson, who plays for Chris Bodie, played with many other people. We actually did a 40-mile bike ride.
Oh, yeah.
So we started here in Baltimore, crossed over in Pennsylvania a little bit, and then came back. So,
Wow. That's what's up. My son is the age where, bike is everything. I really resonated with something that you were talking about with your 4-year-old, and about how, when you were that age, you were practicing for 90 minutes in one setting, and just imagining trying to get your, your kid to do the same thing. I have the same experience with my son, and I'm like, what kind of a weirdo was I to want to practice? I mean, and I actually really wanted to practice. Yeah. And I have no idea where that comes from. I can't take any credit for that. It's just some kind of weird, I'm just like some kind of weirdo. Because when I see my son, I recognize what's normal.
Yeah.
The kind of stuff that he wants to do, and how sort of scattered he is and into everything. And, I bought him a trumpet and a set of drums and a guitar and stuff. And every once in a while he'll say, hey, can you give me a lesson? But really it's because he just wants to come and sit in my lap, which is fine. And at whatever point he decides he wants to do something, or if he decides he doesn't want to do that, it is totally fine with me. Yeah. One thing that I do have him doing is push-ups, set-ups, pull-ups, dips, and body weight squats.
Yeah.
And I gave it a more a more fun kid name. We call them muscle legs. Right. And you know, I've got one of those pull-up bars you can put in a doorway.
Nope.
And they're assisted. You know, I'm helping him to do his pull-ups, but he can do about 20 push-ups.
Nice.
And that's pretty good for a kid his age. And he could do about 3 pull-ups unassisted.
Nice. Yeah.
You know, so he's getting his strength together. We've been doing it for a while. It's just a good, you know, it's a good routine to get into. And kids need structure. You know, and you got to do the same thing in the same order, you know, because yeah, at least with him, he really thrives when he has really specific things. When we get to bedtime, here's the list of things that we're going to do. Yeah. And it almost like relaxes him and helps him to calm down, to go to sleep, because that kid doesn't need any sleep.
Yeah, same stuff. It's like the Energizer Bunny. You just keep going.
Yeah. It's so kind of crazy. But yeah. But yeah, the fitness thing. But you know, my son is at the age where his bike is the thing, and you were talking about going for a ride, for that 40-mile ride. My son and I have probably been on maybe a 5 or 6 mile ride. We've got trails around the house.
Okay.
Where I'm at, I live in a suburb, and it's got these really nice bike trails.
Yeah.
And he's just all about riding. That's all he wants to do. You ask me like several times a day, we already went riding today. We got to go riding again. It was like 6 miles of riding. You know, he just unlimited energy and just curious about everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome.
So why don't you tell us about your kids?
So, like I said, I have 5 kids. My oldest kids are with my ex-wife. I met my ex-wife in college, and we were married for 9 years. And like I said, I had 3 kids with her. My oldest is a girl. She's turning 20 this year. She's a wonderful singer.
You're an old man. Huh? That means you're old.
I was like that, yeah. she hangs around Berkeley. Well, before all this stuff, you know, she was hanging at Berkeley a lot. You know, just getting her stuff up, getting her singing chops. And then we had 2 boys. One is an incredibly gifted basketball player, but I don't see him making the league only because he's, you know, coming from me and his mom, he ain't gonna be too tall. So we'll see about that. And my other son, he's 16, by the way. The other one is 13. So and they're living up in the Boston area right now. So when we got divorced, I kind of just relaxed for 2 years, and then I got remarried to my current wife, who's a retired ballerina, but she's currently teaching dance at a private school. She's where I get all my running stuff from, because she runs damn near 11 to 13 miles every day.
Oh,
but she, I ain't gonna talk about her. That's a whole nother story. But she's a beast. But we had 2 other kids, and my son, we have a boy and a girl. My son is the oldest; he's 6, and my little girl is 4. So I'm not quite sure about what they want to do right now. So, but they have each other right now.
Yeah, my wife is also a dancer.
Nice.
Contemporary dancer. Mm-hmm. She has her own dance company.
Okay.
And I interviewed her actually for this series also, and she teaches dance in high school.
Nice.
We used to go to the gym together after. Like right after we got married, we were going to the gym, and I think I kind of beat her up a little bit because I just have a go switch. I don't have like a medium, and slow. I don't have that. It's just go.
Yeah.
And so, but she stuck in there with me for 6 months.
Wow. Nice. Nice.
So I was like, okay. It's all weightlifting stuff. I mean, we did some treadmill and elliptical.
Yeah.
That's what I do as far as like the cardio thing, like elliptical.
Yep.
That's pretty, and also bike. I can do the bike.
Mm-hmm.
That works pretty good. And actually, one thing I've noticed is from riding the bike, regular bike, with my son, as much as we have been as of late. Actually, it's actually helping my knees quite a bit,
Yeah.
which is kind of an interesting thing.
No, you don't have that pump, that constant pounding.
Right.
Guys like ourselves, with weight coming down on our joints like that, if your wife is a dancer, I'm assuming she's little, like mine, or not, my wife is all of 130 pounds, 125 pounds on a 5'4" frame, so
Right.
she's good to go.
Yeah. My wife's the same. She's small.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so let's talk about some current events, some projects that you're working on right now. I know that you have a recent reincarnation, recent CD release. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yep. So that record came out February 28th, 2 weeks before everything shut down. Bad timing. I mean, it's not like, the stuff was in the news, but we never thought it would get to this point. So, I had a bunch of dates for that record, but unfortunately, every one of them got canceled. So I wasn't able to properly have a release party. But I have something in the works coming up in about 2 weeks. So we're going to do the very first show with all of that music, a live stream. But that record is basically, prior to that, I've released, I think, 7 records of pretty much traditional straight ahead jazz. Mm-hmm. The most recent before Reincarnation was a record called Convergence. And that record had Christian McBride, Jeff Watts, John Schofield, and Brad Meldau. And, I just wanted to do something else, like what we were talking about earlier, how I had all this music around me. I didn't grow up in a jazz household. I grew up with everything, especially just hearing all the stuff with my sisters, what they were listening to. And then for me coming up in middle school and high school in the 90s, especially high school, because, I don't know if you can clearly make out that picture that's right next to my head, but that's a picture of Tupac. And you couldn't tell me I wasn't from the West Coast back then, Tupac, I'm such a huge hip hop fan, at least back then. I kind of got disconnected from a lot of hip hop music once I went to Berkeley because we didn't have a radio in the dorms and stuff like that. We didn't have access to the TV, so I had no idea what was playing. No car, no nothing. But my love of R&B and hip hop and other styles of music is all pretty much tied into this record. So, I wanted to kind of mess with people, for people who bought the entire record. If you're listening to it from top to bottom, like the very first track, I come in on the vibes, kind of like a little swinging thing. I want people to think oh, here we go, another swing record. But then they immediately hear electric bass, wind chimes, and you hear a friend of mine. He's a DJ here in Baltimore. He has a really deep voice. His name is Marcellus Bassman, and we go straight into that R&B stuff. So there's a couple of songs where I have a vocalist. Her name is Imani Grace Cooper. I actually wrote all the lyrics for it, for I think 3 songs we did on there. We did one cover, which is For the Love of You by the Isley Brothers, slightly rearranged. So long story short, it's still a jazz record. It's just, we took away the whole swing feel. And some people have said that, oh man, Warren, you playing that stuff? I'm like, it's still jazz, if you want to call it that. But I was like, we just took away the swing. We still got changes. We can still play around it. But that's the one thing I was trying to avoid. I didn't want to really tell people and have to explain the record. Like, oh yeah, listen to this section, how we go to this. You hear that chord, you hear this chord. My whole goal for this record was for people to buy it and just turn it on and says, this feels good and it sounds good. I wanted the regular person, like the people who know absolutely nothing about music besides it. This either sucks or it feels good. And, you know, I think I reached my goal on that one.
You know, Imani, so...
wait, she got ties out there.
Huh?
She has ties to Columbus.
She does.
Sorry, I forgot about that.
That's right. So she went to New Salem Missionary Baptist Church when she was in Columbus. And
I have a friend who went to Berkeley who is also from Columbus.
Who's your friend?
Nia Allen.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I know Nia.
Okay.
Yeah. So Nia, the daughter of Milton Ruffin.
Okay.
And Milton and Merlin. And Milton is the minister of music at that church in New Salem.
Okay.
And so Nia Allen was one of the worship leaders at the church for a long time.
Nice.
Until she left Columbus. But fairly recently, Nia, Imani, and some other singers, maybe about a year ago, did a concert at New Salem. And I kind of reconnected with Imani at that point. We had done some gigs earlier together with one of my bands called Perfect Storm. And that was kind of, I think she was going to school. She was in college.
At Howard.
At Howard, that's right. She was at Howard, but I think our gig was like during the summer or something.
Okay.
So anyhow, making a long story short, I had to cancel her gig at Ohio State because of the coronavirus pandemic.
Wow. Yeah.
She was going to be part of this past jazz festival. We have an annual jazz festival in March, and we got to spring break, and it was looking like everything was going to happen, and then all the dominoes started falling, and then the whole thing got canceled. So, but I'm going to have her out. But she's talk about a terrific vocalist.
Yeah, no, she was awesome, man. She came in and just, I first heard her, matter of fact, when she was at Howard, and this was like her coming out party. I mean, a lot of people know her in DC, and people know her in certain pockets like Ohio, and I believe she has ties in Minneapolis. But this was her first time actually being on a record by a quote unquote major label, at least for jazz. And she did a wonderful job. So she kind of like made the record, So
yeah, she's super bad.
Yeah.
What other projects? What other things that do you have in the works right now?
So even though everything shut down like around March 12th, I was in talks with the company. I'm signed with Mac Avenue Records, and we were planning a Christmas record. And we actually managed to record that Christmas record a week later, like after everything was shutting down. This was like right before the whole mask thing, right with all this stuff. We were kind of like, all right, just stay away from me. You know what I mean?
Right.
The whole mask thing wasn't that big of a deal at the moment. So, recorded a Christmas record where I actually played vibes, piano, Fender Rhodes, percussion on this track. It's myself, a trio, like bass and drums, and I had 3 singers on there. So just my take on a few classic tunes. Nothing like Jingle Bells, nothing like that. But I got just to name a few. What's it called? Hey, Mr. Grinch, you're a mean one, Mr. Grinch.
Yeah.
That one, Happy Xmas by John Lennon. Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy by Tchaikovsky. Now, when people hear that, they're gonna be like, "Whoa, this is a little different," because I put a like complete R&B vibe on there. But you know,
Yeah.
as usual, Christmas songs you gotta swing a few. So you know, we did Winter Wonderland, This Christmas by Donny Hathaway. But I'm very happy with this record. So it's actually coming out next month on September 18th.
Yeah, man, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And those are great records because it's timeless. I mean, you'll be able to sell that like forever.
That was the whole idea. And even if I can get some shows, the whole idea is around that Christmas time season, sell the record, play some shows for people who want Christmas music, you know.
Yeah.
Very popular stuff. So
now, I'm going to digress a little bit. You were talking about all the different kinds of music around your house when you're growing up, and I heard you talking about your reincarnation project with, you know, your kind of all of the different influences. You know, I interviewed Nicholas Payton, and you know, one thing that he was saying was that he doesn't really see. There's not really a line of demarcation per se in black music. You know, black music is black music, right? And all black music is going to have three components. You know, this is, he didn't say this. This is something I'm adding to it. It's going to have improvisation. It's going to have polyrhythm, and it's going to have blue tonality. And I think one thing that's happened, which I think has been unfortunate, is there's been sort of these artificial lines drawn. Because in my experience, musicians, black musicians in particular, they just want to play, you know, and it's just about whatever the music is.
Yep.
And it doesn't necessarily have to have a name, a style name. And another issue is when we say jazz, the term jazz is very ambiguous. Like what, you know, like how is that particularly different from hip hop? I mean, there's definitely jazz aspects in hip hop, right?
Definitely.
Like a lot. I mean, a lot of the stuff that was sampled is in hip hop. I was a big hip hop head growing up.
Yeah.
I produced a couple hip hop artists, and so all of that stuff is like baked in the cake with me too. All of the different, you know, all the different styles of music, rock and roll, and everything from country to hip hop and what we call jazz. It's all in there, and that to me, especially in 2020, feels a lot more natural than, okay, I just want to do, you know, 1950s, you know, hard bop.
Yeah.
You know, that's what this is, you know, this is going to be about. And I'm, you know, that's not against anybody that's doing that and that does it well.
Yeah.
I think we need that too. But I don't know. I just don't see the reason to draw these kind of artificial lines between these different styles of music, because it's really all the same stuff.
Yeah.
And
I think it's all the same. I don't think there's any point of it. And Nicholas is somebody that I really look up to. He knows that. Like a lot of stuff that he does, I don't talk to him like for guidance. I just listen to what he does, and I'm like, okay, let me steal things like that. I like playing it all. I'm only gonna speak for myself.
Yeah.
Last night, I played with some good friends of mine here in Baltimore. We did a concert for Charlie Parker because it's his centennial birthday coming up this Friday or Saturday.
Yeah.
I haven't played that much bebop in so long, but it was cool.
Yeah.
But then you flip the script. Well, for me, I'll go from that to playing with a group like I'm a part of the SF Jazz Collective. I've been in that band for 6 years. we hardly play any type of swing in there. It's just good music, you know. Can be a little complicated sometimes, but you know, we just play some good music in there. And then Friday night, oh, I'm sorry, last night, that was last night. Yesterday afternoon, I had 2 gigs yesterday. I played with a flautist in New York. Well, she's from New York. She came down to Baltimore. Her name was Mayu, and the music she played, I was playing piano. It's a mix between classical and folk music with a hint of jazz or improv, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I don't really like divide novels and stuff. I'm more the person like, listen, what do you want to do? What's your music? Let's just go and play it.
Right.
You know, I'm skilled enough. If you want some improv here, that's why I like to tell all my students that, like, we're just playing some improv music. But you know, I'm fighting. It's for me. I look at myself and people like Nicholas Payton and others. You know, we're fighting a long battle to try to get people to stop calling it jazz. I know Nicholas is just like gung ho about it. Like, stop calling it that. Jazz is a 4-letter word. And I get it, but it's like, dude, man, I was like, there's so many people out here, they just identify this music with jazz, smooth jazz, acid jazz, hip hop jazz, and all this other stuff. You know, you look at one of my favorite records by Madlib. He took all these classic Blue Note recorders and you know, like, what's the tune by Bobby Hutcherson called Montera, and he put a big hip hop beat on that. So when young hip hop kids gonna hear that, they gonna be like, oh man, that's that classic jazz hip hop. Kareem Riggins, he's a jazz drummer playing with Diana Krall, but he's a big time hip hop producer. He takes all of those ideas from Jay Dilla and Pete Rock, CL Smooth. All of those guys take all their influences from jazz artists and just put it into their music. Matter of fact, if you listen to some Wu-Tang Clan, some of their stuff, I swear you'd be like, wait, that's a little piano line right here. It's just nothing but some probably that Monk played or something like that.
Yeah.
You know.
Tribe Called Quest.
That's another one.
Yeah, Eric B. and Rakim.
Yep, the Eric B., Rakim, The Roots.
Yep.
A whole bunch of them. I mean, even if it's not necessarily jazz, one of the things I was going to say to you earlier, some of the music, I'm not trying to focus on hip hop music, but you know, just in other styles of music, a lot of the music that really resonates with me is music that has chords that I figure out that I can kind of play over. The other day I had a family reunion, and they had this 25-minute slideshow on Zoom. And they had all this music playing, you know, they played from Mary J. Blige to the OJs to some other stuff. And eventually I got tired of looking at the slideshow, so I started playing the piano behind me. And I was just messing around with all these different chords. You know, I like doing stuff like that. There's an artist out by the name of Kiefer. One of my homeboys told me about him. He's a pianist, I think, in LA. This dude has all these wonderful like hip hop beats, but he's flowing on the piano as if he's Oscar Peterson. And it sounds great when he's doing it. I mean, just a nice beat, but he's just got a few chord changes and he's just gone. He's just gone all over it. I'm just like, and it doesn't sound like he's trying to play bop music. He's just fitting, you know, playing what he hears. Yeah. Playing what he feels, I guess.
Yeah, you know, a lot of these sort of genre names are, it's kind of like a record company's strategy to figure out what music to sell to what audience. It's more for that purpose than it is for any so again, the term jazz is ambiguous, right? So and you mentioned something like smooth jazz. I remember there was a smooth jazz station. I was driving from Michigan down to Nashville one year for the summer NAMM show. And I remember there was some kind of a smooth jazz station on or whatever, and there was playing Anita Baker.
Okay.
And I love Anita Baker.
Yeah.
Also, what was another song that I heard on that station? Tony Braxton.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking to myself, this term doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's like instrumental R&B. That's what you mean, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, So yeah, I think there's some problems with the terminology in academia. It's tough because jazz is still fighting for significance. Is still struggling to be valued at the same level as the European classical music. Of course, the academy was designed, the conservatory models is designed around classical music.
Mm-hmm.
And so jazz is sort of on the outside of that already. And you have all this history and all these traditions, which is beautiful. I don't desire to dismantle that music. Jazz wouldn't be what it is without that tradition. Mm-hmm. So there's no competition there. But jazz is already kind of struggling for and a name change. A name change to that music. Mm-hmm. It's tough. So for instance, and I know some schools have done this, they have at least seriously considered it, changing it from jazz to like American music studies or Black American music studies, as in like what Nicholas is talking about. But it's like it's kind of a tough thing because you have all this history calling it a certain thing, and then
But I think some students will still identify with jazz. And to your point, I'm a faculty member at 2 schools right now, but I'm what you're talking about, I'm going to focus on one for a second. I teach at San Francisco Conservatory of Music. Mm-hmm. The name of the program out there is called RJAM, Roots, Jazz, and American Music. That's what it stands for. But just because we have that J word in there, it's, they still have, that's how they still attract the students.
Right.
USC, they have 2 different programs out there. They have the jazz program, which is run by Bob Menser. And then they have the other side called the contemporary jazz program. And that's run by Patrice Rushen. Then you look at mostly all the other schools, it's just straight. I mean, if you take Berkeley out the equation, all the other schools are just like, okay, this is our jazz program. Even at the other school I teach at, which is Peabody Conservatory here in Baltimore, we have it's just the jazz program. I used to teach at Temple University. It's like, come study jazz. At Berkeley is one school I could say they don't even focus on that word. It's like, all right, you come in here, you're going to learn music. That was the one thing that I really liked about that school. Well, not but that was one of the main things.
Did you know, or do you know, Dr. Melisina Morris?
Melisina Morris. In Baltimore?
From Peabody.
Oh, I'm pretty sure that's the same person I'm thinking about. I think I know her daughter, Melisina Edwards.
Okay.
Does she play violin?
Well, Dr. Morris was she the director of the School of Music there, or the dean of the conservatory there?
I'm pretty sure. Well, not the dean. The dean.
She was a pianist. She's a pianist.
Okay. I think I know her daughter. Her daughter is the chair of music at the Performing Arts High School that I mentioned, the Baltimore.
I see.
Arts. Her name is Melisina Edwards.
Yeah, I was mentioning that because I was hired at Ohio State while she was the director. Okay. So she hired me. She's while I'm at Ohio State.
Okay.
Well,
nice.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, okay. So, what are you working on right now as far as practicing? Like, what kind of stuff do you practice? Now, understand that my question is not what is good advice for students.
I understand. You just want to know what I'm doing.
what are you doing? Like, what kind of things are you struggling with?
The main things that I'm doing now, it's kind of like I'm just maintaining, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
I have like sometime somewhere around March, April, I went out and bought a bunch of the Omni books. Like I bought Cannonball, Coltrane, Oscar Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
No other was in there. Miles Davis, and most people already had the Charlie Parker. I had that one as well.
Right.
So what I like to do, I like to find those exact clips on YouTube, and I just play toward them. There's nothing different than what I was doing when I was a kid. Like when I was coming up, my dad would have me, because I didn't understand improv, I didn't have any language. My dad would say, "Hey, let's turn on this the tape, at least the cassette tape of playing of Charlie Parker playing Billy's Bounce, and I just want you to play with it." So what does that do for me? It gave me language, timing, and worked on my reading. So that's just something I'm doing a lot when it comes to physical playing on this instrument, on the vibes. Again, it's the same format that I did when I was a kid. I'm still gonna bounce around. So that's on the vibes. Sometimes I even take those same books and I'll transfer it over to my piano playing. But if not, I have this one book in the piano side where it's just a lot of classical music. Like I'm playing tunes like Claire de Lune, the Minute Waltz, just to make sure that your fingers are good. And then once I'm done playing the classical side, I'm just going to go play whatever else. Same thing on the drums. I'm just working on the entire drum set playing, make sure your sticking is good, making sure your rhythms are clean, because I have students and all this stuff. I got to keep that up. Mm-hmm. And outside of actually practicing those stuff, I'm actually just really trying to get my production skills up. So I've been working a lot in Logic and things like that.
Okay, yeah. So Logic, do you use Ableton at all?
No.
Just
Logic all the way.
Yeah, so the most recent update to Logic actually gives Logic some of the functionality that Ableton, basically exclusively Ableton had up until that time. But I use Ableton at church. I'm the minister of music at Second Baptist Church here in Columbus, and we use, I've got in-ear monitors and all that, and I've got click tracks associated with all the songs and production sequences and all that stuff I have set up in Ableton. I could pretty much do the same thing through Logic, and especially now with that latest update. But and then in the studio, I'm using primarily Logic for all the recording and stuff. Have you done any of these sort of multicam videos?
No, I haven't done that yet. It hasn't been required for me yet. The few Zoom concerts I've done. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've done one concert. It was kind of a multicam. Like this guy asked me to do a concert, and he wanted me to hear in my spot, and I use what I'm talking to you on my computer for one view, and I used my cell phone for the other view. But I haven't.
Yeah.
I don't have any actual cameras, none of that.
Well, no, that's not what I mean.
What do you mean?
Like a multicam is like you've seen like those videos where it's like the same person and they've videoed themselves several times.
Oh, that nah.
You know what I'm saying?
I don't have the patience for that. But that's a whole nother lesson. Like my homeboy is like really good at doing that. Because you have to line it up to its perfect and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But also, personally, my feelings toward that is I don't want to do all of that just to put it online. And then what am I going to get from that? I'm going to get a bunch of likes.
You would like the interview I did with Ollie Jackson We went in on that whole
Yeah.
that all being co-signed by likes,
Yeah, nah, I'm cool on that, man.
as opposed to being co-signed, by a master.
Yeah, yeah.
It used to be that there was sort of like there was doorways, there were gatekeepers, and you had to be, blessed by the gatekeeper.
Yeah, yeah.
Now it's like anybody can just do anything, and in this whole, it's a tough thing,
Yeah.
because I think that there's a lot of positive with social media. I think actually a lot of the things that black people have been complaining about, as far as the way we've been treated by, law enforcement and things like that, I think a lot of that stuff has come to light because of social media.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's positive things that are coming out of that. But it's tough too, because there's like as much as it's supposedly supposed to be a way to connect us, it seems like it creates a scenario where we can stay separate more easily, because then we can every once in a while feel like we have some kind of interaction and some kind of validation from people that, is a Facebook friend a real friend?
No.
I mean, oh, you was quick to answer that.
Yeah. I can answer. I got 5,000 friends on Facebook. I probably interact with 200 of them. Out of that 200, I would say a strong 50 are actually somewhat friends. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a tough, but it's a clever strategy that Facebook did by calling that interaction a friend. Mm-hmm. That totally changes. If you think about, like, your 4-year-old or your 6-year-old, how they're going to think of what a friend is, and how, unfortunately, the Facebook definition of friend, how that's going to have to be part of that consideration.
Yeah.
It's like,
that's even going before Facebook. I remember back when I first moved back to Baltimore in 2004, I was hanging out with some friends of mine. And one of my boys, he told me, he was like, "You ever heard of MySpace?" I was like, "What is that?"
Oh yeah.
And he was like, "Man, it's this big social networking thing." And I thought the whole thing sounded silly, because then he kept coming up to me. He's just a local saxophone player. I'm not going to say his name, but he was just like, "Yeah, man, Chick Corea is my friend." And I was like, "Wow, you got Chick Corea to be your friend?" Yeah. Nicholas Payton is my friend. I got all these friends. He kept saying that. I got over 5,000 friends on here. I was like, "Man, what is MySpace?" But not to get into MySpace, but it's relating to what you said to me.
Yeah.
What you're saying. It was like, no.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like the typical thing. It's like Facebook is like Apple. Apple didn't necessarily invent the technology. They just sort of developed further all of the existing technology, and then their marketing strategy is what is the most genius thing about that company.
Yeah.
So it's like Facebook took MySpace basically and said, "Okay, now we'll perfect it."
Yeah.
Well, yeah, man, it's been great talking to you. I feel like, we're just barely scratching the surface. There's all kind of other things we could talk about.
There's a lot more, but we can always do a part 2.
Yeah. I definitely will have to have you back. You have any final words?
No, that's to say to be continued. Because there's a lot more that we can always touch on. I don't have any final words at the moment. Just thanks for tuning in. If I had to say that,
Yeah.
everybody can pick up this Christmas record and still support any other previous records that I have.
Yeah. And I will have your website in the description below.
Okay.
Will be linked to your website so people can find you easily, quickly, and all of that good stuff. Well, I look forward to playing with you again sometime. And you know, you were talking about the Charlie Parker
Centennial.
Yeah, in the concert that you just did. I actually have one coming up on this Saturday.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that. And I've been able to stay active because I'm playing at church, and that has continued throughout. But you know, there's nothing like really stretching out with your friends on stage, you know, in front of an audience.
That was one of my posts early on Facebook, you know, and it was based off of last night because we had such a great time performing. But, you know, I said, I really miss playing for people.
Yeah.
And I haven't stopped, you know, ever since everything shut down. I've continued to play. It's been pulled back a little bit because, you know, a lot of venues are just like, nah, we ain't squeezing no, you know, people in here. But there's 2 venues here in Baltimore who are welcoming me and many others with open arms. So, you know, we're making it happen. We're just trying to keep some joy for people and joy for ourselves as well, you know.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, God bless you. And I'll see you next time.
You got it, bro. You be cool, man.
All right, now.
Later.
Bye.